single shot rang out like thunder in the stillness of the night. The screeching tires of a rusted pickup truck broke the quiet as it skidded to a halt just beyond the old wooden fence. Beneath a blanket of stars, a group of thugs, cloaked in shadows, stepped out. Their laughter pierced the darkness as they approached what they thought was the perfect target, a secluded farm, miles away from prying eyes. Little did they know, this farm was about to deliver a lesson they would never forget. The moon illuminated the sprawling fields of corn, standing tall like soldiers awaiting a command. Just beyond the fields lay a modest farmhouse, cradled by the overgrowth of wild grass and whispering trees. It looked so peaceful, so vulnerable, but it concealed its secrets well. Inside, a worn-out hero named Hank sat with his loyal dog, Duke. Hank was a farmer, sure, but he was no ordinary man. Years of hard labor had forged a spirit that even time could not break. He had weathered storms, both in nature and in life, and knew a thing or two about fear. On this night, however, what had been a routine evening turned dark. Hank had his feet kicked up on a rickety coffee table, a cup of black coffee steaming beside him. As he stared out the window, a shadow flickered against the porch light. For a moment, he thought it was just his imagination playing tricks. Then it came again, a shuffle and a whisper, a language of mischief that sent chills down his spine. Duke, sensing the shift in the air, darted toward the door, barking ferociously. Hank, suddenly alert, set his mug down and crept toward the front. He had learned to trust his instincts, and they screamed at him to be cautious. As he opened the door, the night crashed over him, and outside, chaos unfolded. The thugs were bold, armed, and unafraid. They laughed, imagining the wealth of the farm just waiting for them, before they had even laid eyes on it. They kicked up dirt as they ventured closer, their arrogance swelling like tidal waves. But what they could not see was that each footfall echoed like a warning, a siren signaling their imminent doom. "Hey!" Hank's voice bellowed, heavy with authority. Like thunderclaps, the words ricocheted off the walls of the night. The thugs halted, laughter slipping from their lips, replaced by a tension that stretched the air tight. One of them shouted, trying to mask his unease with bravado. Hank was a sturdy figure, dressed in his worn plaid shirt and faded jeans. In the dim light, he stood like a mountain, unyielding against the winds of chaos. "I'm the owner, and you've crossed the line," he replied, stepping further from the house. With each stride, he embodied a silent confidence, his hands steady but poised. The haphazard gang, backed by reckless bravado, took a calculated step back. But suddenly, Hank wasn't just a man standing in his driveway. He was a soldier facing intruders, a guardian of his sacred haven. Years of hard work and sacrifice morphed into something more profound, a primal instinct to protect. This was not just land. It was home, a home where his ancestors had toiled, where memories filled every room. The thugs exchanged nervous glances. They had underestimated this place, and they had underestimated him. "Listen, old man," one thug sneered, "you don't want to mess with us." His voice dripped with an unwavering resolve that seemed to dispel the shadows around him. In that moment, the gang was caught in a vice of their own making. Fear punctured their arrogance like a needle through a balloon. They started to circle him, how they had imagined it in their wild, reckless dreams, but now the fantasy felt flawed and crooked. As they edged closer, Hank's eyes narrowed. He quickly surveyed his surroundings. There, on a piece of ancient machinery, lay a rusted pitchfork, the kind of tool that, in the hands of a determined farmer, could be a weapon more formidable than any gun. He moved toward it, and a ripple of tension slithered through the air. "Come any closer, and you'll find out what I'm capable of," he warned, picking up the pitchfork with surprising ease. This was not just an object of farming. It was a reflection of his rage, his history, and his refusal to be a victim. The leader of the thugs hesitated, sensing that this confrontation was no longer a simple act of thuggery but a reckoning. "Think smart, old man. This isn't your fight," he retorted, but the quaver in his voice betrayed him. Hank took a step forward, brandishing the pitchfork with the grace of an artist wielding a brush. "This is my fight, and I'll take what's mine from you." As if committed to a plan written in the shadows, the thugs didn't retreat. They charged, hands ready to unleash chaos. Hank, with the pitchfork still held high, felt time slow to a crawl. He reared back and propelled it forward, striking the ground just in front of the leader, a warning shot that sent dirt flying like a cannon blast. Duke barked fiercely, launching himself toward the nearest thug, teeth bared. The thugs, fueled by uncertainty, stumbled back, their bravado crumbling to dust. Hank, emboldened, charged forward. He wasn't just fighting for himself, but for every drop of sweat that had fallen on that land, for every memory that had taken root. The thugs lost their confidence, scrambling to escape the very thing they had thought would be easy prey. Hank advanced, pitchfork ready, the very essence of the land coursing through him. They stumbled over each other, their bravado evaporating into the night air. One of them shouted, but it was too late. As they fled for the truck, Hank pressed forward, his heart thundering in his chest. Each beat was a reminder that fear could be faced, resistance could be found. His voice chased them down the driveway, cutting through the night like a knife. In a moment frozen in time, Hank stood over them, defiant, victorious, a guardian of his land. As the truck peeled away, dust clouds swirling behind it, Hank felt the weight of the world lift off his shoulders. The adrenaline still coursed through him, but a calm settled around him. He was not just a farmer, he was a protector. Duke bounded up to him, tail wagging fiercely, as the first whispers of dawn began to break on the horizon. Sun, like a golden igniter, spilled across the fields of corn, illuminating the remnants of a battle fought not just with weapons, but with courage and the spirit of a man unwilling to back down. In the light of day, the farmhouse stood proud, its weather-beaten walls holding the stories of generations. As Hank leaned against the porch, he understood that the fight was not just for this land, it was a testament to resilience, a reminder that in a world lit by shadows, every blessing comes with its battles. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the dawn wrap itself around him like a warm embrace. There would be scars, physical and emotional, from this night, but he had defended his sanctuary. There would always be threats lurking in the darkness, but Hank was ready. He had proven that beneath the seemingly simple life of a farmer lay an indomitable spirit and the heart of a warrior. And that, the thugs had learned too late, was the true strength of this humble, sprawling farm. The night was still, cloaked in the heavy scent of fresh earth and hay. A chorus of crickets serenaded the moon, casting a silver glow over the sprawling fields of corn. But within that tranquility, danger lurked. A rusted pickup truck rumbled down a dirt road, tires kicking up dust like an approaching storm. As it screeched to a halt, a band of thugs piled out, their laughter echoing into the silence. They believed this would be an easy score, a quiet farm, far from the eyes of the city. But they were terribly mistaken. At the heart of the farm stood an unassuming farmhouse, its wooden beams weathered by time but standing tall, rooted deeply in resilience. Inside, an old man named Hank sat in his worn armchair, eyes drifting toward the window. The shadows played tricks on his mind, but he'd learned to trust his gut. Something was off tonight. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, sensed the tension before Hank did. The dog sat alert, ears perked, and a low growl rumbled from his throat. Hank set his book aside and leaned forward. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a guardian of this land, a steward of its stories. The legacy of his ancestors folded into every inch of the soil. As the moonlight flickered over the porch, Hank felt a jolt of adrenaline. He opened the front door, creaking loudly on its hinges, startled by the sight before him. The gang of thugs stood huddled, scanning the property with crude smirks on their faces, confidence radiating from their reckless demeanor. "Hey, old man," one of them shouted, the bravado masking the fear flickering in his eyes. With a voice like gravel, Hank replied, "This is my land, and you're the ones who don't belong here." The thugs exchanged glances, momentarily caught off guard. This old man wasn't backing down. In a world where so many would have simply cowered, Hank stood firm, grounding himself like the ancient oak trees that bordered his property. One thug, built like a bull, stepped forward. "You think we're scared of you?" The words dripped with arrogance, but inside they quivered with uncertainty, a heart racing beneath the bravado. Hank held his ground, heart pounding like the hooves of a galloping horse. This wasn't just about a robbery, it was personal. It was his legacy. He had spent decades caring for this land, growing crops, nurturing the soil, and building a life filled with hard-earned sweat. What you see here is not just land, its history, love, and sacrifice. Each word dripped with unyielding strength, echoing in the cool night air. The laughter faded. The thugs were no longer on a fun adventure, they were experiencing a reckoning. Yet they couldn't let fear be the boss. They moved closer, edging forward like predators hunting for prey. Hank glanced around, eyes honing in on a weathered pitchfork leaning against the side of the house. To the thugs, it was just a tool. To him, it was an extension of his very being, a symbol of the fight that had run through generations. With a swift movement, he grabbed the pitchfork, lifting it high. The metal glinted under the moonlight, a warning bright and clear. "You'll regret this decision." Confusion flickered across the faces of the gang, their bravado waning. One thug, the apparent leader, sneered. He taunted, stepping forward with exaggerated confidence. But Hank felt a fire ignite within him. The years of toil, of battling storms and blights, had prepared him for this moment. "You're no match for the heart of a man defending what is his," he declared, his voice stronger than ever, resonating like a drumbeat in the quiet night. With a sudden burst of movement, Hank lunged forward. The pitchfork struck the ground in front of the lead thug, sending a spray of dirt flying. The thugs froze, eyes wide, shock replacing their cocky bravado. Hank shouted, emboldened by the surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He pressed forward, the weight of the land behind him propelling his actions, the spirit of generations past guiding each step. In their confusion, the thugs stumbled backward. They hadn't expected this. They had expected an easy target, a lone farmer who would cower in fear. But here was a man who refused to yield. Hank roared, the pitchfork held defiantly. He advanced again, and the thugs, once a menacing gang, now rendered foolish and frightened, turned tail and scrambled for their truck. One of them shouted, the stench of panic stark in his voice. They jumped into the vehicle, fumbling with the keys, eyes darting nervously back at Hank. But this wasn't a momentary victory. This was a reminder of courage when faced with overwhelming odds. Hank stood tall, his hand steady on the pitchfork, a symbol of unyielding strength in a world that didn't always understand. As the truck roared to life, tires screeching against the gravel, they sped away, leaving a cloud of dust that hung in the air. Hank dropped the pitchfork, feeling the adrenaline settle like a weight on his chest, mixing with disbelief and a sense of triumph. Duke trotted back to his side, tail wagging, sensing the victory, the reprieve from danger. Hank knelt down, rubbing the dog's head. "You were brave tonight." "We both were," he murmured. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, the world around him began to awaken. The fields shimmered, the corn bathed in a golden glow, a stark contrast to the darkness of the night before. It was a new day, filled with hope, promise, and the scent of fresh earth rising into the morning air. Hank took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the life around him. These fields were more than crops, they were a testament to resilience. He understood that danger could approach at any time and that thin walls of uncertainty often masked the true strength to fight back. He reflected on the moment, feeling the rush of his heart still thundering. What had just unfolded was more than an encounter. It was a dance between fear and bravery, the daily struggle between chaos and calm. Every scar, every tile of the land had been earned through hard work and determination, qualities that couldn't be stolen by power or weapons. As he made his way back to the house, Duke at his heels, Hank glanced once more toward the horizon. He had defended his sanctuary. In that brief moment of confrontation, he hadn't just fought for a piece of land, but for every person who dared to believe they could rise against fear, for every farmer who tilled the soil with hope in their hearts. It would take more than thugs to shake the roots of this farm. His heart swelled with pride, echoing the fortitude of the land and its essence. As sunlight poured in, illuminating every corner of the home, Hank settled back in his chair, heart still racing but now filled with an ineffable calm. He picked up his book, but the words on the pages blurred, his thoughts drifting back to the encounter. They had thought the farm was an easy target, but they had mistaken vulnerability for weakness. He smiled to himself, knowing that the fight was never just about the physical. It was about the spirit that lived within, the spirit that refused to back down, to surrender, no matter the odds. This was not just a farmer's tale. This was a reminder of resilience, a testament to the tenacity that lay within not just him, but across the land powerful and unwavering. And that spirit, like the roots of his cornfields, would weather even the fiercest storms. As day turned to evening and the stars began to twinkle in the sky once more, Hank sat on his porch, reflecting on the night's battle. He understood that the rhythm of life on the farm was not just a series of planting and harvesting. It was tapping into something greater, a connection to the earth, to the past, and to every struggle faced. He knew the world might try to take more, but he was ready. The thugs may have thought his farm was an easy target, but they had awakened something in him, a warrior spirit that would protect his home, his legacy, and every life that thrived on the land. With the sun setting behind the fields, Hank felt a quiet assurance settle over him. No matter how dark the night, he would always be ready to stand guard under the stars. Because while anyone can try to dominate through fear, it is the unwavering heart that truly commands the land. A single gunshot cut through the silence of the moonlit night, echoing like a thunderclap across the vast fields of corn. The rusted pickup truck that had rolled in just moments earlier stood still, its engine humming softly as four figures piled out, cloaked in shadows, confidence dripping from their every move. They thought they had found an easy target, a lonely farm, isolated from the world, ripe for the picking. But they couldn't have been more wrong. Hank Lawson sat in his favorite chair, worn from years of hard work and love. He'd spent his life tending to this land. The sturdy farmhouse, the rustling cornfields, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance, they were more than property to him. They were his legacy. As he sipped his coffee, dark and strong, a gut feeling stirred within him. Something was off tonight. His faithful dog, Duke, sensed it too. With a low growl, he moved to the door, muscles taut, ready. Hank followed him, an old habit from decades of listening to the whispers of nature, the elements. He stepped outside, the cool night air jolting him awake. The stars glittered above, but the calmness of the night flickered with an electric tension. The sight that met him was all too familiar, menacing figures stalking toward his barn, their laughter ringing hollow against the backdrop of crickets. They were fueled by youthful bravado, believing they could take whatever they wanted without consequence. Hank felt a rush of adrenaline. This was his home, and he would defend it with everything he had. Hey! Hank's voice boomed, gravelly and determined, cutting through the night like a knife. The thugs froze, momentarily surprised. They hadn't expected a challenge. "Who the hell do you think you are?" One of them sneered, stepping forward. He must have thought his bravado would quell the nerves beginning to creep in amongst his crew. "I'm the man who protects this land," Hank replied, standing his ground, trying to radiate confidence despite the pounding of his heart. He had faced storms, droughts, and hardships that could break lesser men. This wouldn't be the end of him, not today. The thugs huddled together, masked bravado fading under the weight of Hank's unwavering resolve. But they wouldn't retreat so easily. Fueled by false bravado, one thug, stocky and loud, shouted, "You think we're worried about you?" Hank felt a flicker of anger ignite, but it was quickly replaced with a chilling focus. He scanned the area, looking for anything he could use, a tool, a weapon, a way to defend his territory. His eyes landed on a pitchfork leaning against the barn, an old friend that had survived many seasons. Without hesitation, he marched toward it. The thugs, sensing his movement, drew closer, encircling him. Duke let out a bark, fierce and protective. Hank shouted, grabbing the pitchfork's handle, feeling its weight align with his resolve. It was just a tool, but in this moment it became a shield, a symbol of his fight. "What's that gonna do?" The leader taunted, but his bravado had a tremor. Hank lifted the pitchfork, pointing it directly at them. "It's about defending what's mine," he growled, his voice steady. The thugs exchanged uncertain glances, and for a moment fear flitted among them like a shadow. They had come with the intent to intimidate, but Hank stood before them, a living, breathing barrier. One of them chuckled, but the laughter didn't reach his eyes. He had seen the flicker of seriousness in Hank's gaze, the determination that told him this wasn't a game. Hank stepped forward, forcing them to retreat a step. "You think you can walk into my life and take what I've built? You don't know the first thing about hard work. This farm is my home, my family's home." The bravado of the thugs cracked. They were just kids playing at being tough, but now they faced a real man standing firm for everything he loved. Then, without warning, one of the thugs lunged at him, a misguided attempt at attack fueled by panic. Hank moved swiftly, the pitchfork jabbing forward, narrowly missing him. The thug tumbled backward, falling against the dirt with a thud. This was no longer a fight against a bunch of thugs. This was an assertion of identity. Hank felt the rush of adrenaline pumping through his veins, transforming fear into raw energy. Fueled by his instincts, he pressed forward. "You came here looking for an easy score," he shouted, and with each thrust of the pitchfork, he drove home the point. The gang backed away, doubt coursing through them as they scrambled to regain their composure. They hadn't anticipated this kind of resistance. They hadn't expected an old farmer to stand his ground. Their bravado was fading fast. One of them shouted, panic slipping into their voices. In their hurried retreat, they stumbled over each other, realizing they had miscalculated their odds. Another yelled as they sprinted toward their truck, the sounds of panic trailing behind them. Hank stood tall, pitchfork in hand, ensuring they understood the finality of their failure. They jumped into their vehicle, wild-eyed, scattering dust as the tires screeched. The truck roared to life, racing away as if chased by shadows, their egos in tatters behind them. With a breathless sense of triumph, Hank lowered the pitchfork, adrenaline still coursing through him. Duke bounded to his side, tail wagging, sensing victory. They stood together, the old farmer and his dog, watching the cloud of dust fade into the distance. In that moment, Hank felt a weight lift off his shoulders. This was his land, a sanctuary crafted through years of toil and battle. He had defended it fiercely. What he had done was more than just chase away a group of thugs. It was a reminder of who he was. He had faced fear and stood resolute when all odds were against him. It resonated deep in his soul, filling him with the warmth of understanding. The world might challenge him again. Challenges would come, just as surely as the seasons changed. But he had discovered that strength came from within a spirit crafted through years of hard work, sweat, and love for the land. With the cool night air settling around him, Hank turned back toward the house. As he walked the familiar path, memories flooded back. The laughter of children playing in the fields, the warmth of family dinners, the smell of crops in the summer sun. Each moment blended into the next, weaving a tapestry of life that was colorful and rich. This was all worth fighting for. As he stepped inside, the night calmed and the stars danced above, twinkling in the deep blue sky. Hank took a moment to reflect, a smile creeping across his face. He glanced at Duke, who had settled beside him with a soft sigh. Duke lifted his head and nudged Hank's hand, a silent agreement swirling in the air. Together, they had faced the storm and emerged on the other side, stronger for it. The next morning, the sun broke over the horizon, pouring golden light across the fields. Hank rose early, ready to tackle another day. The day carried with it a renewed sense of purpose. He inspected the land, each crop thriving under the nurturing sun. But beneath the routine of farming, the memory lingered, a reminder that bravery comes in many forms. Life often throws curveballs, people who believe they can take what isn't theirs, but it also offers lessons. The thugs had thought this farm an easy target, yet they learned what every farmer knows. You don't mess with someone who has a deep-rooted connection to their land. As the days rolled into weeks, Hank continued his work, transforming that night into fuel rather than fear. Each sunbeam kissed the earth, reminding him of the fight he had waged, not just as a farmer but as a man with a history, with a heart full of spirit. Sometimes, even the smallest gesture can send ripples through the world. Hank became a symbol of strength in the community, a figure that inspired others to confront their fears, to stand tall in the face of adversity. And as dusk settled on the farm again, Hank took a moment to appreciate the stillness. The world may bring its challenges, but it could never strip away the heart and soul rooted deep within him. Each day was a gift, a reminder that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the determination to face it head-on. In the distance, the horizon painted itself in hues of orange and purple, shadows dancing across the fields. Hank stood at the edge of his property, feeling the weight of the past but holding on to hope for the future. Because here, among the cornfields and cattle, he had found a piece of himself, a legacy worth protecting, no matter the cost. He would forever stand guard, ready to protect his home, his heart, Because sometimes all it takes is one fierce spirit to turn the tide against those who think they can take what doesn't belong to them. And Hank was ready for whatever came next, unwavering in his resolve, unbreakable in his love for the land. A single shot shattered the calmness of the night. It echoed against the swirling silence, sending ripples of tension through the moonlit air. A heavy-duty pickup truck lurched to a stop just outside the old wooden fence of a worn-down farm, its engine rumbling like an ominous thundercloud. 4 figures emerged, cloaked in shadows and intoxicated by the promise of an easy score. They were young, reckless, and utterly unprepared for what lay ahead. Inside, Hank Lawson sat in his worn leather chair, a mug of coffee steaming beside him. The warm, rich aroma filled the cozy farmhouse, but a strange chill tugged at his gut. Born and raised on this land, Hank knew every crack in the walls, every whisper of the wind through the trees. Something was off tonight. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, was already alert, ears perked and muscles tense. The dog could sense it too, something unnatural lurking just beyond the door. A low growl rumbled from Duke's throat, and Hank's heart raced as he set down his mug. He knew better than to ignore the warning signs. With careful steps, he approached the door, muscles coiled, ready for whatever lay beyond. The moment he swung the door open, the night slammed into him, thick with the smell of dirt and danger. Laughter drifted in the air, harsh and mocking, as the intruders drew closer to the barn, their playground. It was all a game to them, a chance to prove their bravado, and they believed they could take advantage of an old farmer perched alone in the middle of nowhere. One of the thugs barked, a smirk plastered across his face. Hank sized them up, 4 against 1. They were young, perhaps drunk on bravado or sheer stupidity. He clenched his jaw and stepped forward, planting his feet firmly in the dirt. Their laughter faded, replaced by palpable tension. For a moment they hesitated, unsure how to respond. Hank was no ordinary farmer. He had survived droughts, storms, and other trials life threw his way. This was not the first challenge he had faced, and it wouldn't be the last. "Come on, man. Just step aside," the leader said, trying to regain control of the situation. "No one needs to get hurt." Hank could hear the thin thread of fear in the thug's voice. They had come expecting an easy target, but the sight of him steadfast and resolute caught them off guard. They quickly underestimated what they were up against. Hank shot back, anger bubbling just beneath his calm exterior. With each word, he could feel the ground beneath him shift. This was more than just defending a piece of land. It was standing firm for everything he believed in. His farm represented years of hard work, dreams carved out of the earth, and memories filled with laughter echoing through the fields. "Let's not play games here, old man," the leader said. "We're just here for a little fun." But Hank wasn't listening. He had grabbed a shovel from the side of the barn, holding it firmly in his hands. It wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of his will, a symbol of every battle he had ever fought. The thugs exchanged glances, doubt creeping in like shadows stretching over the ground. They had thought this confrontation would be a walk in the park, a quick score with little risk involved. But the confidence in Hank's voice cut deeper than they expected. One thug shouted, stepping forward, eager to prove his bravado. "Where I come from, we don't run from a fight," Hank replied. He tightened his grip, determination coursing through his veins. The atmosphere thickened with tension. Then from behind Hank, Duke let out a deep, fierce growl that rumbled like thunder. The sound pierced the night, causing the thugs to falter. The leader ordered, but Hank didn't flinch. This was his territory, his friend. In a sudden burst of movement, one of the thugs lunged forward, making a reckless attempt to grab the shovel from Hank's hands. In one fluid motion, Hank pivoted, swinging the shovel through the air with all the strength and determination he could muster. With a sudden crack, it connected against the thug's side, sending him sprawling to the ground. The group of young men froze, genuine fear replaced their bravado as Hank stood unwavering, shovel firmly in hand. "I warned you," he growled, stepping forward. Duke bolted forward, barking ferociously as the remaining thugs scrambled back, their confidence shattered. They hadn't expected this. Instead of cowering in fear, Hank had fought back a tug-of-war between courage and intimidation that they had never anticipated. The leader shouted, panic in his voice. They turned and sprinted for their truck, desperation fueling their flight. Hank let out a deep breath, the tension momentarily easing as adrenaline coursed through his veins. He felt alive in that moment, a surge of empowerment washing over him. He called after them, feeling the weight of victory settle in his chest. But it wasn't just about winning the confrontation. It was about standing for what mattered, pushing back against the darkness that threatened to invade his life. The thugs leaped into their truck, scrambling, fumbling over one another in their rushing panic. As they tore away, tires screeching in the gravel and dust flying into the air, Hank stood rooted to the spot, shovel still gripped tightly in his hands. Duke bounded back to him, panting and proud, tail wagging in joyful chaos. Hank knelt down, ruffling the dog's fur. "We did it, buddy." As dawn began to break, the sky shifted from inky black to soft hues of orange and pink. The night air gave way to a vibrant morning, and Hank felt a sense of relief wash over him. The danger had passed, and yet a deeper realization remained. This was more than a fight. It was a testament to resilience. Every heartbeat reminded him that he was more than a farmer. He was a defender, a fighter fiercely loyal to his home. Trials would come, but he had faced this one, head-on, with the spirit of his ancestors guiding him. He turned and made his way back to the farmhouse, heart still racing, a sense of pride sparking within him. In every corner of his property lay memories, a testament to all that he had built and all he had fought for. Later that day, as he went about his work, the rhythm of life returned to normal. The gentle hum of crickets, the distant bellow of cattle, the rustle of wind through the trees, it all felt like a soothing lullaby. But deep down, something had shifted. He was no longer just a man tending to his fields. He was a guardian, ready to confront whatever might come his way. The news of his stand against the thugs rippled through the community, morphing into a story shared around dinner tables and night gatherings. Hank became a symbol, a figure of strength. Neighbors stopped by to share their admiration, bringing gifts of fresh produce and warm meals, their hearts swelling with respect. As the sun dipped below the horizon on that fateful evening, Hank sat on his porch, the warmth of the day fading, replaced with the cool, refreshing air of dusk. He watched shadows stretching across the land, the very ground he had fought to protect. The sky turned a brilliant orange as the stars began to twinkle, and for a moment, Hank reflected on how close he had come to losing everything. The thugs had underestimated him, overlooked the power of a man who held his ground, who believed in the weight of his home. In that moment of introspection, he realized fear often held a greater grip on those who didn't fight back. It was that silence, that compliance, that allowed darkness to creep in. But he had chosen to confront it, and in doing so created a legacy, not just for himself, but for all who would come after him. With Duke resting faithfully by his side, Hank made a promise to himself. He vowed to cherish the land, to honor his ancestors by continuing to toil, to protect the very essence of what made his life whole. And as the stars emerged in their brilliance, Hank felt a sense of peace settle over him. The battles would come, but he was prepared. He bore the spirit of all who had walked this earth before him, resilient and unwavering, ready to defend what he loved. Because this wasn't just a story about a farm. It was a reflection of endurance, a reminder that true strength lies within. The thugs may have thought his farm an easy target, but they had learned the hard way that the might of the human spirit cannot be underestimated. Tomorrow would come, bringing new challenges, but Hank would stand vigilant, shovel in one hand and courage in the other, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The farm was not just his home, it was a battleground one. And as long as he had breath in his lungs, he would fight to keep it that way, no matter the odds. Darkness enveloped the farmhouse like an ominous shroud, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the night breeze. A little left to chance, and the old wooden structure seemed to disappear into the shadows, just another forgotten relic of rural America. But beneath the surface, life buzzed relentlessly, steady and unwavering. Inside, Hank Lawson sat in his favorite chair, eyes scanning the pages of a worn book, the soft glow of a single lamp illuminating his weathered face. Suddenly, the quiet night splintered with an eerie sound, a distant roar. Hank looked up, heart pounding. He placed the book down and set his coffee mug aside. That growl in the distance wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. The sound grew louder, rumbling closer like a storm rolling in. His instincts kicked in. A beat-up truck crested the hill, headlights cutting through the darkness. It lumbered down the dirt path, dust swirling in its wake, and Hank's gut tightened. It was a vehicle that didn't belong here. Using the rubber handle of his cane as support, he eased himself to his feet, every joint protesting the movement. He glanced at Duke, his loyal German shepherd, as the dog stood alert, ears perked and eyes locked on the approaching headlights. As the truck lurched to a stop, 4 figures spilled out, cloaked in shadows and bravado. They leaned against the hood, their laughter mingling with the night air like smoke. Hank knew what they were: thugs, drawn to the solitude of the farm like moths to a flame. They believed they had found an easy target, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. "Hey!" one of the thugs shouted, swaggering forward. Hank's heart raced, but he felt heat rising in his chest. "You need to turn around and leave," he called back, his voice steady and firm, cutting through the night air with more authority than he felt. "Come on, man." "It's just a little fun," another thug chimed in, his grin wide and reckless, revealing an arrogance that came from youth and ignorance. But Hank wasn't in the mood for games. The thrill-seeking bravado of these young men ignited something fierce within him, a primal urge to protect what he had built with years of hard work. This farm was more than just land. It was home. It held the stories of his family, generations of toil, and a deeply rooted connection to the earth. With a calming breath, Hank stepped outside, Duke trotting at his side. The thugs stopped laughing, surprise washing over their faces as they took in the old man, cane in one hand and the fierce German shepherd beside him. Hank's voice cut through the air. The thugs shifted nervously, eyes darting between Hank and Duke. Fear simmered beneath their bravado. "Look, old-timer, we didn't come here to cause any trouble. We're just looking for some quick cash," the leader said, trying to smooth over the growing tension. His bravado faltered, the facade slipping for just a moment. "Get off my property," Hank replied, his tone even but unwavering. Hank's words hung in the air, a challenge laced with the weight of history. He could sense the hesitation creeping into their ranks, each thug searching for a glimmer of confidence that was evaporating by the second. One of them crossed the line. "You know what? Just hand over the cash and we'll be on our way." The thug stepped closer, a threat wrapped in casualness, but Hank detected a flicker of uncertainty. He barked, taking a step forward, the shadows dancing around him. "This isn't just an empty field for you to take." Duke let out a low growl, ready to pounce at a moment's notice. Hank planted his cane firmly on the ground, its wooden handle rough beneath his grip. If push came to shove, he was ready to defend his home. The leader stepped back, visibly rattled. Hank roared. The atmosphere shifted, thick with unspoken tension. For the thugs, the night was losing its thrill, replaced by an unsettling fear. Fury surged through Hank. They had underestimated the heart of a man defending his home. Hank said, his voice filled with resolve. At that moment, he reached for the shovel leaning against the porch, the energy around him pulsing with the motivation to protect everything he held dear. He brandished the shovel like a sword, the metal shining ominously in the moonlight. The thugs stepped back, uncertainty clouding their faces. "You're making a big mistake," the leader said, trying to mask the quiver in his voice. "No," Hank replied, unwavering. Duke launched forward, barking furiously, and the thugs hesitated just long enough for Hank to take command of the situation. With a quick swing, he slammed the shovel into the ground, kicking up a cloud of dirt between himself and the intruders. He shouted, the years of labor and care boiling over into a primal scream of defiance. The thugs exchanged frantic glances, their confidence crumbling into dust. Before they could react, Hank charged forward. The thrill of adrenaline coursed through him as he swung the shovel through the air, forcing them to dodge back. One thug stumbled, falling to the ground with a thud, knocking the wind from his chest. Panic erupted among the group. One of them howled, scrambling toward the truck. In that moment, Hank felt alive. He wasn't just standing against them. He was drawing on every fight he'd ever faced. Years of tending to this land ignited fire in his heart. Just then, he spotted a gleam from something on the ground, a broken bottle discarded during a previous act of vandalism. He picked it up, brandishing it like the pitchfork he'd always been trained to wield, his instincts pushing him forward. This wasn't just a fight for a man. This was a fight for a legacy. As the remaining thugs jumped into the truck, Hank moved closer, determined not to let them escape so easily. "You thought you could just roll in here and take what's mine." They gunned the engine, gravel spraying beneath the tires as they sped off, leaving Hank standing tall, muscles coiled tight, adrenaline still racing through his veins. The dust settled, but an electrifying tension lingered in the air. Hank dropped his makeshift weapon, feeling a strange mix of relief and triumph. Duke bounded back to him, barking joyfully, tail wagging. Together, they stood among the remnants of the confrontation, breaths heavy, hearts racing. Hank couldn't shake the rush of pride swelling within him. He had stood against the darkness and won. As dawn broke across the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, a wave of calm swept over Hank. The sun's rays spilled into the fields like a warm embrace. Every blade of grass whispered a welcome to a new day. But things had changed. The farm that once felt like a sanctuary now bore the marks of a battle fought, a testament to resilience. Hank understood in a profound way that every storm tested the limits of his spirit, but it also fortified it. He reflected on the strength that surged within him. Days turned into weeks, yet the memory of that night stayed fresh. News of the encounter spread through the small town, painting Hank as a local hero. Neighbors would stop by to share stories of their own battles, binding Hank in a web of community and loyalty. He found himself sharing a sense of solidarity with those around him, other farmers, shopkeepers, and townsfolk, all of them forged in a mindset of perseverance. With each passing day, he could feel the spirit of that night weigh less heavily on his conscience. Most of all, he understood that every threat ultimately fortified their community, instilling in them a fierce loyalty to one another. He was older now, the lines on his face deeper, but the resolve inside him had never been stronger. The farm flourished under his care, with corn swaying gently in the wind and crops now thriving in a way that mirrored his own renewal. As summer approached, Hank spent late nights sitting on the porch, Duke at his side, watching the stars twinkle overhead. He would sip sweetened tea, recalling the fateful encounter and how he had fought for everything that mattered. Through it all, he recognized that his love for the land was intertwined with his love for the community. He began hosting gatherings at his farm, open to all the neighbors and friends who had stood beside him. They shared stories of resilience, laughter echoing late into the summer nights. And amid the camaraderie of those evenings, a deep bond formed, united by a shared understanding of courage in the face of adversity. The thugs had thought they could invade his haven, but they had awakened something far greater, a fire that couldn't be snuffed out. As the weeks passed, their dares faded into mere memories, and Hank turned his focus back to nurturing the land, transforming fear into hope. He knew the strength of community, the power of protection, and the resolve of standing tall. What remained etched in his mind was that an easy target doesn't exist when there's a heart willing to fight. As the seasons changed, Hank found himself facing new challenges in agriculture, droughts, pests, and other unforeseen obstacles. But he stood through it all, grounded by his unshakable belief in the importance of resilience. Sometimes the battle lines blurred between farmer and soldier, but every time the sun set and rose again, Hank knew he stood on sacred ground rooted in history, love, and an unwavering sense of duty. Years later, long after that fateful night, the farmhouse continued to pulse with life. Hank relished in the laughter of children running through the fields and the gentle clucking of chickens roaming free. It felt like a symphony, each note woven together with memories of joy and struggle, triumph and heartache. As he stood on the porch, looking out at the land, he whispered a silent promise to the spirits of his ancestors. He would always stand guard, ready to protect his piece of the earth, because he understood in a profound way that this farm wasn't just soil and crops. It was a living testament to the strength of the human spirit, a legacy built on courage and resilience. He would carry it forward, not just for himself, but for the generations to come, crafting a narrative where bravery lived and breathed in every corner of the fields. because easy targets only exist in the eyes of the unprepared, and Hank Lawson, with every fiber of his being, would never let that happen. The night was thick with tension, cloaked in shadows, when the quiet of the small farm was suddenly shattered. A shrill sound sliced through the darkness, a gunshot ringing out, echoing through the stillness like a clap of thunder. In the distance, headlights cut through the blackness, darting toward the weathered farmhouse. The rusted pickup truck screeched to a halt. As it pulled in, 4 figures spilled out, laughter escaping their lips like they were kings heading into battle. They didn't think twice about the danger lurking in the night. To them, this farm was an easy target, a place where they could grab some cash and disappear into the darkness with little resistance. Little did they know, they were stepping into a living fortress guarded by a defiant spirit. Inside the farmhouse, Hank Lawson sat in his favorite creaky chair, the kind that squeaked secrets of its own. A coffee cup half full sat on a table beside him. The warm aroma of freshly brewed Java filled the air. Yet Hank felt a cold chill creeping up his spine. Years of farming had sharpened his instincts, and they were screaming at him to pay attention. Something was wrong. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, was already on high alert, pacing the floor like a coiled spring. With narrowed eyes and a low growl rumbling in his throat, he moved toward the door, urging Hank to follow. Hank pushed himself up, feeling the familiar creaks of his joints, and walked to the door, cane in hand. As he swung open the door, the night enveloped him like a thick fog, immediately assaulted by the sight of the thugs standing in front of the barn, bravado hanging in the air like cheap cologne. One of them shouted, clinging to the hood of their truck, his bravado barely hiding the flicker of uncertainty that briefly crossed his face. Hank felt his chest tight. He could see their youth, their arrogance, but they didn't realize they were dealing with a man who had spent a lifetime nurturing this land. "You're trespassing," he called out, his voice steady and low, cutting through the night air. Laughter erupted among the gang as they stepped forward, emboldened by their numbers. "What's an old man going to do?" The leader jeered, but Hank wasn't about to back down. Every beat of his heart echoed the spirit of generations gone by, farmers, warriors, and fighters who had faced adversity head-on. With steady resolve, he repositioned himself, knowing he had to defend his territory. "You've picked the wrong place to play your games." The words hung in the air, weighted with defiance. Hank had weathered storms before, both in nature and in life. This was just another challenge, but it carried the weight of his family's legacy. A battle not just for land, but for pride, history, and honor. One thug, aggressive and brash, took a few steps forward. "Come on, old man, just hand over some cash and we'll be on our way." There was a slip of fear beneath his bravado, a flash in his eyes that betrayed uncertainty. Hank gripped his cane tightly, feeling the wood pressing against his palm. "Hurt me." At that moment, something stirred within him. A force that came from years of farming, of pouring sweat into the earth, of standing firm against the elements. He had defended his crops from drought, and here he was prepared to defend his legacy from foolish thugs. "Just get the hell off my property," Hank commanded, adrenaline coursing through him. He could feel the weight of his ancestors' spirits guiding him, urging him forward. Life on this farm had taught him the importance of standing firm, and he wasn't about to back down now. Just then, Duke unleashed a fear spark, a sound that reverberated through the fields, amplifying Hank's resolve. The thugs hesitated, fear creeping into their bravado. In this moment, Hank understood the power of intimidation. "Maybe we should bail, man," one of the thugs suggested, glancing nervously at his buddies, but the leader shot him a glare, unwilling to retreat. "What's this guy gonna do?" With defiance, Hank took a step forward, the weight of the land behind him, and said, "I may be old, but I've fought harder battles than the likes of you." The leader's bravado faltered slightly, and Hank seized the moment. As the tension thickened, the thugs exchanged glances, uncertainty now etched in their expressions. They had approached believing that this would be little more than a robbery, a hassle-free theft, but now fear was taking root among them. Suddenly, in a burst of adrenaline-fueled courage, one thug charged at Hank, but Duke sprang into action, teeth bared, positioning himself between his owner and the attacker. Hank sidestepped, swinging his cane like a weapon, bringing it down hard on the ground with a loud thud. The sound resonated through the area, striking fear in the hearts of the intruders. Hank shouted, holding his ground as the gang faltered. They were no longer the hunters. They had become the prey, fear creeping in with every heartbeat. The leader attempted to regroup, rallying his friends. "This is ridiculous, we can take him." But even he could feel the shifting tide. A man ready to defend his territory was a force to be reckoned with, and they were clearly unprepared for that. Hank yelled again, refusing to back down. His heart raced, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he made a decision. He needed to push them back. The gang began to disperse, some retreating toward the truck, but Hank pressed on. "You'll regret this." The thugs stumbled over each other in their rush to escape, panic igniting their feet. One shouted, their bravado shattered as they scrambled back to their vehicle, desperation fueling their every move. Hank watched, shovel raised high, fists clenched, feeling a surge of triumph surge through him. Hank called out as they sped away, tires screeching against gravel, the sound echoing through the night. Duke pranced back to Hank's side, barking joyfully, wagging his tail as if they had just won a great battle. Hank took a slow, deep breath, trying to catch up with the whirlwind of emotions. Relief flooded over him as the weight of the night lightened, but he couldn't shake the exhilaration coursing through his veins. As dawn slowly broke over the horizon, its golden light spilling across the fields, Hank felt a mix of triumph and pride settle into his bones. The fight was over, but the battle had awakened something within him that ran deeper than he realized. This was more than just a skirmish for land. It had been a fight for spirit, identity, and legacy. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night loomed large. News of Hank's confrontation spread through the small town, transforming into a tale of bravery and resilience. Neighbors would visit, sharing how inspired they were by the story, and as they passed through Hank's gates, he could see their eyes glimmering with admiration. That feeling of solidarity sparked something new in Hank, igniting the importance of community. It didn't just belong to him. It was a collective spirit woven through each family, each farm, each struggle. In some ways, the encounter had transformed him into a guardian not only of his land, but of those who called it home. As the summer sun shone brightly overhead, Hank opened his barn doors to everyone, inviting his neighbors to gather, share stories, and enjoy food under the wide-open sky. Laughter echoed through the fields as families sat together, sharing a bond strengthened through their own trials and tribulations. Hank marveled at how each person had their own version of a fight. Farmers and townsfolk alike shared tales of courage, and Hank listened, understanding that each story was a thread adding to the fabric of their community. They spoke of hardships battled, storms survived, and the unwavering spirit to keep going. In those moments, surrounded by friends and neighbors, warmth grew. It felt like home in the purest sense, an extension of what he had fought for, a mosaic of shared experiences and united resilience. Hank understood now. Even in the face of darkness, strength comes from relationships made and fostered through adversity. As the fall approached and harvest season began, Hank threw himself into his work, finding solace in the rhythm of planting and gathering. Every day spent in the fields replenished him, serving as a reminder of the victory fought mere months ago. He forged ahead with purpose, thankful that he had not only stood his ground, but had also forged relationships that would stand the test of time. Weeks passed, the leaves turning and falling like whispers of autumn, and Hank was outside on a late afternoon gathering the rest of the onions. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the fields and igniting the sky in shades of orange and purple. As he stood there in the calm, he felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. The challenges he had faced were merely stepping stones leading him to this moment, a moment of powerful reflection, nestled in a rich tapestry of life. With Duke loyally at his side, Hank gazed at the landscape spread before him. Each blade of grass and every inch of tilled soil spoke of a history steeped in hard work, struggle, and unswerving dedication. He realized that every encounter had added depth to his story, transforming fear into courage, and struggles into stories that would inspire future generations. Harvest would soon come to a close, but with each sunset, he considered the fight he had won. He had not only defended his home, he had emerged as a beacon of resilience. Through that confrontation, he understood the importance of standing firm in belief, a belief rooted in love for the land and the community intertwined with it. In the years they would come, new challenges would undoubtedly arise. There would be storms, pests, and unforeseen obstacles, but he was prepared. He was not just a farmer, he was a protector, guided by the knowledge that strength lies in unity. As Hank picked the final vegetables, a feeling washed over him, a sense of peace enveloping him in the gentle embrace of twilight. He knew the fight against adversity wasn't over, nor would it ever end. Life would always demand resilience. But as long as he stood tall on his land, surrounded by the spirit of community and the love of those who fought alongside him, he would always rise to the occasion. The thugs had thought his farm was an easy target. They were wrong, because sometimes victory wasn't just about winning a fight, it was about building a legacy that rippled across time, threading through generations to come. And Hank stood ready, a guardian of his land and the heart of a community forever tethered by unyielding strength. A rusted pickup truck barreled down the dirt road, tires kicking up clouds of dust, a dark silhouette against the fading light of the day. In that moment, the tranquil farm lay peacefully beneath the expansive sky, the golden fields swaying gently in the evening breeze. But the calm would not last. Thugs erupted from the truck's cab like a pack of wolves, wild-eyed and brimming with confidence. They believed they had found an easy target, a farmer left alone, an isolated piece of land ripe for the picking. Hank Lawson, the farmer, sat on his porch, his weathered hands holding a mug of steaming coffee. He squinted into the distance, a knot tightening in his stomach. He had weathered storms in his life, both literal and metaphorical. It was those experiences that had sharpened his senses. Something was off, and he could feel it in his bones. Duke, Hank's loyal German shepherd, was already alert, pacing back and forth, feeling the tension build in the air. "Stay close, Duke," Hank murmured, his voice low and steady. He put the mug down and leaned forward, eyes narrow. The thugs swaggered toward the barn, their laughter harsh, echoing in the quiet of the night. They thought they were invincible, that they could just walk onto his land and take what they wanted. But Hank wasn't simply going to let that happen. "Hey!" Hank's voice boomed, cutting through the night like a knife. The group halted, laughter slipping away as they turned to look at him. Confusion began to replace the bravado that had initially fueled their approach. One thug spat, stepping forward with forced bravado. He tried to mask the hesitation flickering behind his eyes, but Hank could see it, a crack in their armor. "I'm the man who protects this farm," Hank replied, standing tall, cane in hand. The thug tried to reassure his friends with a nervous laugh. "Come on, man, this ain't worth your trouble." Rage boiled inside Hank. This was more than cash. This was his life, his history, etched into every inch of this land. "This is my home," he shot back, voice steady. The thugs exchanged glances, their confidence beginning to falter as they took in Hank's unyielding stance. They had expected an old man to cower, a soft target easily exploited. But Hank had weathered storms far worse than these boys could ever dish out. One thug, desperate to regain the upper hand, took a step forward, puffing out his chest. "Look, old man, just make this easy on yourself." Hank gripped his cane tightly, letting the wood ground him in the moment. "You think I'm afraid of you? This farm is worth more than any cash you could walk away with." As he spoke, Duke moved closer, growling low in his throat, sensing the rising tension. Hank felt a fierce pride swell within him. This was not just about agriculture. It was about family, tradition, and the spirit of a man unwilling to back down. Suddenly, a glimmer of panic flashed in the eyes of the thug. While he had imagined easy pickings, he was staring into the eyes of a man who wouldn't yield. "You think we're playing games?" He barked, but the fear was evident. Another thug, tapping his foot impatiently, called out, "Just scatter." That command broke the standoff. The remaining thugs began to charge forward, emboldened by the leader's cowardice but fueled by fear. Hank took a step back, positioning himself against the porch railing, a counterforce against them. Hank yelled, the command vibrating with authority. The first thug lunged at him, but Duke wasn't having it. The dog lunged forward, teeth bared, barking ferociously, protecting his owner like a soldier. Hank swung his cane, striking the ground not as a weapon but as a declaration of defiance. With a sudden surge of movement, Hank was propelled by sheer instinct. He shoved the cane sideways to trip the nearest thug as he aimed for him. The thug stumbled and fell hard, crashing into the dirt. Panic spread like wildfire through the group as they scrambled to process what was happening. One shouted, scooting backward toward the truck. Duke growled fiercely, positioning himself between the attackers and Hank, ready to pounce. The leader hesitated, eyes darting between his comrades and Hank. He sneered, though it trembled slightly, revealing his doubt. Hank shouted, each word laced with furious conviction. Then, crumbling under the weight of their fear, the thugs turned and bolted for their vehicle, scrambling like rats. Hank took a step forward, fueled by adrenaline and the tangible sense of victory. Run! As they piled into the truck, tires screeching against the gravel, Hank felt the rush of triumph swell within him. They had underestimated him. They had thought his farm an easy target. As the dust settled, Hank leaned against the porch, breathless, Duke at his side, tongue hanging out and panting. The adrenaline slowly gave way to a calmer realization. He had defended not just his land, but the very essence of who he was. His heart raced in sync with the fading engine sounds as he caught his breath. But there was no time to celebrate. The aftermath of their attack lingered in the air like the scent of smoke after a fire sharp and raw. Hank felt an immediate ache in his heart and a surge of deeper thought. What if they returned? What if they didn't come back alone next time? Let's head inside, buddy, Hank said, forcing himself to push the vulnerability back down. The old farmhouse had always been a refuge, a bastion against the storms both literal and metaphorical. He stepped inside, closing the door against the evening chill, locking out the chaos of the world outside. He reached for his old hunting rifle, checking the chamber. The weight of it felt reassuring as he slid it into his hands. The memories of his youth came flooding back. Days spent in the fields, learning the ropes of life, lessons imparted by his father on how to stand tall against adversity. As Hank settled into his chair, he kept the rifle close, glancing outside, taking stock of the shadows dancing under the moonlight. Each sound outside made him more hyper-aware. Any rustling leaves or snapping twigs sent a jolt of anxiety through him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the thugs would return, not simply to hit his farm, but to finish what they started. Sleep eluded him that night. Every creak of the floorboards echoed in the darkness like a warning bell. He finally drifted into an uneasy slumber, only to be awoken by another jolt. It was muffled at first, but Hank recognized it immediately, the sound of a truck rumbling down the dirt road. His heartbeat quickened as he grabbed the rifle, the cold metal grounding him in the moment. "Duke," he whispered, feeling the dog's presence beside him, the way he radiated loyalty and instincts. They both settled into silence, the night stretching out before them like a tightrope. Peeking through the window blinds, Hank could make out the silhouette of the familiar truck, the same rusted piece of junk that had nearly invaded his life before. Panic surged through him as he realized those thugs were back. This time they weren't just coming for money. They were coming for revenge. "Stay close," he murmured, adrenaline igniting in his veins. He quickly took position near the door, rifle raised, steeling himself for what was to come. The darkness of the night hung menacingly around him, each moment stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. The truck's headlights swept across the field, illuminating the curling tendrils of mist hovering over the grass, a perfect scene for an ambush. Hank's heart thudded harder in his chest as shadows emerged from the cab, more figures than before. They had brought backup. The back door swung open and the thugs spilled onto the ground, their laughter louder now, tinged with the reckless abandon of youth powered by anger and adrenaline. One of them shouted. Hank gritted his teeth, his muscles coiling tightly. They had thought he was easy prey once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. He felt a surge of anger mixed with dread as he stood at the threshold of his home, the place he'd fought for. But in that moment, he realized this fight would be different. Alone, he could only defend himself for so long. With the odds stacked against him, he needed a plan. He needed to summon the strength of the land that had raised him, memories infusing his resolve. The invaders crept closer, their voices hushed but filled with malicious energy. Hank took one last deep breath, summoning the power of the soil, of every seed planted and harvest claimed. He had fought for this land, and he stood ready once again. As they closed in, Hank's mind raced. He couldn't let them in. He wouldn't let them take what was rightfully his. His legacy depended on it. And as the shadows of the past loomed, he felt the weight of every challenge he had faced pressing down on him, the spirit of his ancestors whispering through the night. The thugs stepped onto the porch, fingers hovering over the tools of chaos they carried. "Let's teach him a lesson," one of them said, each word laced with the thrill of mischief. Hank raised the rifle, his voice steady and unwavering in the stillness. "You might want to reconsider," he called out, the words grounding him in the storm brewing outside. And just like that, the night held its breath, teetering on the edge of chaos as the echoes of their confrontation reverberated through the darkened landscape. What was coming next? Only the night-hand Hank could tell.